This is an MSNBC special. Brian Williams reports the Tony Blair interview.
How dangerous is President Putin and how dangerous is Ahmadinejad? How much of your free time is given to concerns over these two forces who are relatively new to the global political power map?
Well, I think I'd probably answer them pretty differently, really. I mean, President Putin is someone I've worked closely with over the years, but, you know, it's...
Do you trust him?
I trust what I do trust what he says to me, actually, and I've had a good personal relationship with him. I mean, I'm obviously worried about aspects of what is happening in Russia, and I said to him, and I don't think I'll say more than this, when we met in the summit in Finland recently with the European Union, that in the end, a relationship between ourselves and any country, I think people don't quite get this today, but a relationship between ourselves and any country has got to be based on shared values and shared principles. And I think it will be a lot harder for Russia to have the relationship it wants with Europe and indeed with America, unless there is that sense of shared values. And obviously there's a question mark there at the moment. In relation to Ahmadinejad, I think it's a different scene altogether there. I mean, I think the issue for me is that Iran is supporting terrorism. That's what they're doing. So and what do we do about a regime that does that?
Consequences?
Well, that's a very big question, but it's the coming question unless Iran understands that this isn't about regime change in Iran or hostile intent towards Iran. People want to, I mean, I'd be perfectly content to have a good relationship with Iran, but it's difficult when they're supplying weapons that are killing our forces, when they're going into Iraq, Lebanon, Palestine, different places, trying to cause the maximum trouble, trying to foment it deliberately.
Americans who were watching at the time will not soon forget the kindness you showed and the gravity of your words after 9/11. Your speech in the church in New York days after was so memorable, is still. What did then 7/7 do to you as a prime minister, as a citizen, as a husband and father?
The thing that was most shocking about 7/7 was that these were people born and brought up in Britain. But all that showed me was, yet again, how deep this sickness was. You know, how strong the roots of this ideology were, that you actually had, you know, you had, I remember watching the video of one of the bombers and talking about how we were oppressing him and his faith, and I'm thinking, you were brought up in this country, free to worship, more free than actually in many Muslim countries. You know, you had a good job, you had a free national health service, you got decently educated.
So you refuse to agree with the anti-war critics, that the anti-war critics are out there saying, don't you see the connection? You're dealing with such a terrible domestic terrorism problem, British citizens bombing their own people because Blair joined Bush and they're killing people overseas. That's their position.
That is their position, and you only have to
just...
You
don't see it?
No, because you only have to take a step back and look at the extraordinary and twisted nature of that logic. Because we're not over there killing people. Actually, it's other Muslims who are driving the car bombs into the middle of Baghdad and killing people.
Are the Allies making friends? Not to be flip?
Well, we're there with the consent of the democratically elected government. I mean, sometimes the people in Iraq and Afghanistan who are elected, and you've got elected people now, first time in those countries, you've got people who are elected. They're almost like disenfranchised. You know, we had the president of Iraq here the other day, President Talabani, good man, spent all his life in opposition to Saddam, now is the democratically elected president of Iraq. I think his words were covered here. You know, these people have a right to be heard, and you won't defeat, you see, you won't defeat this terrorism until we stop pandering to a part of their logic. So that when they say, well, you can't blame us for thinking we're being oppressed when you are in Iraq or Afghanistan, you've got to take that head on. You know, what are you talking about? We get rid of Saddam and the Taliban and we put in place UN-backed democratic processes. What is the oppression?
So you think, and I'm not being argumentative, it just occurred to me that in my travels through Baghdad at the height of the war and afterwards, when you see these citizens who just today want water when they turn on the spigot and power when they come home at night, they're looking for property in Jordan to get out of there. The classic Ronald Reagan question, do you really believe Iraqis are better off today in a world absent Saddam, but in a world where violence marks their lives?
But Brian, what I say to you is, why haven't they got the water and the electricity and the economic development they need? Because of the terrorism, because of the security. The people who go out and commit the terrorist acts or throw the stones, they're not representative of the whole population. The population got the chance to vote and came and voted. Our people are there with the consent of the government, with the United Nations mandate. If we end up imbibing a part of the logic of these people so that we actually end up saying the problem in Iraq is British and American forces, the problem in Iraq is the terrorism. Now, true it is, we've got to defeat it, and that's the tough challenge. But my point is very simple. We won't defeat it by giving in to it.